Okay, Emmy fans, the two biggest mysteries at this year's Derby are what will win Best Comedy Series, what will win Best Drama Series, and you may think smugly that you know the answer, but you don't know anything until you talk to Daniel Montgomery, our senior editor. Daniel, set this up. The dynamic at work with these two top races.
Well, with both of these categories, they're unusually difficult to predict. In recent years, there's been kind of a momentum sweep mentality where, like, a show wins and they keep winning. Modern Family 5 times, Veep 3 times. This year is confusing on both sides because on the comedy side, Veep is gone because they didn't air episodes this season. Their last season was delayed. And so that's going to have a different winner. So it could be any number of different shows, maybe Atlanta, maybe Marvelous Mrs. Maisel or something else. And in drama series, it's the opposite problem where you have the two defending champs that are back. Handmaid's Tale, which won last year, and Game of Thrones, which won 2 years the last time it was eligible. So they've never gone head to head. So you've got two winners facing off against each other. So, it'll be interesting to see what shows have the momentum and which shows get new momentum on the comedy side. It's an unusual race in both cases.
Let's start with comedy. Of our 18 experts, 9 pick Atlanta to win, 9 pick Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. It should be noted that there's a new voting system for the past 2 years. This is year 3, where the whole voting system has changed. So what you need now to win is a plurality of the votes. In other words, it's now down to a system of where voters, and I'm one of them, pick just one winner instead of ranking them. Because in the past, the ranking system tended to go more toward a consensus. And now we see upsets happen all the time, like in the acting races, Tatiana Maslany or Ben Mendelsohn winning and us going, whoa, how did that happen? It's a very interesting dynamic. So that said, out of 7 likely nominees in this race for comedy series, just only the most votes. So Atlanta did very well last year, Daniel, right? It won Best Comedy Actor and Director. And right now, between This Is America, his song, and big breakout video, Donald Glover, of course, I'm talking about, and Solo, the Star Wars thing, this guy is hotter than ever. And Atlanta seems to have the momentum, or at least the track record with the guilds and with the predecessor awards. But Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is the hot ice cream this week. What do you think, Daniel?
I think the plurality definitely helps Atlanta in the sense that it would not do well on a consensus choice kind of ballot. It's the kind of show where a lot of people are gonna, a few people are gonna love it. A lot of people are maybe not gonna really get it. But the fact that it's plurality, you just need, and if there are 7 nominees in the race, you only need a certain fraction of them to really love the show, and it's going to win. And plus, he's in that honeymoon period, as you mentioned. This Is America. I think he's going to have a new album out before the end of maybe the summer. And so everyone loves Donald Glover right now, so that helps him a lot. The one thing that gives me pause, and is the reason I'm picking Maisel at the moment, is that Atlanta is not a knee slapper. It's a very dark, kind of edgy, sometimes very dramatic show like Transparent. And while we see those shows do well in the nominations, they do well in acting wins and sometimes in craft categories and writing and directing. Funny almost always wins Best Comedy Series, and I feel like Maisel has that. And Maisel has been putting out, as far as a campaign, a full court press. I hardly ever see Emmy advertising in New York City, and even here, it's like every subway station is plastered with, please, for your consideration, vote for Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Every cast member on every wall. It's they're really pushing it hard, and it really feels like the flagship of Amazon right now. So I'm giving the edge to Maisel, but I think this could go either way.
You know what I love about Maisel as a contender here is the addition of the word marvelous in the title. You and I, as students of awards, Daniel, have seen through the years, titles on a ballot with the most positive energy, aspirational attributes, this kind of thing, tend to win. I mean, if it has beautiful or it has marvelous, these kinds of things in the title, it does help, or best in the title. For example, I'm thinking of at the Grammys as an example. If you look through like YouTube winning for Beautiful Day, it said those things, just those titles are irresistible. So the campaign for Marvelous Mrs. Maisel does some things very, very smart. For example, most of the poster art you're talking about is joyous. So I don't know it. It just screams joy and love and humor. And she's so appealing as a candidate that even if you haven't seen it, you may vote for it. So because, it just makes me feel so good. Isn't she charming? And the campaign is marvelous. And boy, Atlanta has that problem. It's not a knee slapper, as you see. And almost all winners of this category have been knee slappers. Ally McBeal was kind of borderline okay, but still it's an issue. These other contenders, Blackish, Silicon Valley. I'm reading through the list now of our racetrack odds based on the experts' predictions. Third place, Blackish. Fourth place, Silicon Valley. Will and Grace, Glow, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Those are the top 7 we project nominations for. But Barry's hovering at that 6th spot as in 8, and then number 9 is Good Place. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, which has been nominated before. Of course, it's probably foolish to think it's not going to make the list now. But are there any winners in there, Daniel? Matt Noble the other day wrote a piece on Curb Your Enthusiasm possibly winning, and I thought, I can see that happening maybe. What do you think?
I think it could happen. It's it's an older show, but it hasn't won Best Comedy Series yet. It only shows up once every several years. I think this is the first season it's had for like 6 years. And so it feels like a special event whenever it comes back. And it definitely has that acclaim. I think it still has a certain cool factor. I don't know if it has the same level, like it's not as cool like right now as say Atlanta, but it still has that kind of appeal. So it definitely could win. Blackish, I look at, I think Blackish has the potential to have a breakthrough year this year, and I know we say that every year. But one of the interesting things is their season premiere episode, Juneteenth, which is all about the holiday, the African American holiday celebrating the end of slavery. It's got musical numbers, it's got production values, and they submitted that thing all over the Emmy ballot. They could get more they could get as many Emmy nominations for that one episode just based on everything that's on the ballot than the show has gotten in its entire run so far.
Wow.
So I can see it getting that episode getting into costumes. I can see it getting into, and maybe directing. If it finally gets a writing or directing nomination, we look at those. It's very hard to win Best Comedy Series without at least one of those. So if it gets one of those, suddenly I think it's back in the conversation for Best Comedy Series.
Will and Grace, we don't know what the power of that is. It's won in this race in the past, of course. It's had a triumphant return on the success of its initial Trump parodies videos that just took off and said, everyone, we've got to have this back. And we're happy that we do. So could that pull off a surprise? I mean, just the gay vote alone. Come on in Hollywood. I mean, just this plurality business with the vote is what's so bedeviling for us prognosticators, because these things could happen. I don't think Glow can win. I think it can be nominated. I don't think, but I believe Blackish can win. I don't know about Silicon Valley. Do you think it could happen?
I don't see Silicon Valley winning. They get more and more nominations every year. This year
that was the trajectory of Veep. Remember, Veep wasn't winning at first, and we're going, well, why not? It's got the prestige factor. It's about the White House. It looks like West Wing, but over in comedy. That's West Wing swept on the drama side. So why isn't Veep sweeping? And it just took years. It took that slow build, and boom, now it just owns the category when it's there. So that's a significant thing, right? Like we're in the case of Kimmy Schmidt, it's not been gaining number of nominations, right? In the case of Curb Your Enthusiasm, it disappoints in terms of the broad range of nominations. These are important, right?
Yeah, it is. And certainly you want to be gaining momentum more than losing it, certainly, in terms of the nominations. And it definitely helps. And Silicon Valley is liked everywhere that counts. It's always got at least 1 or 2 nominees for writing and directing. The one thing that it's missing that I think has been holding it back is the actors branch. The show in all of this time, because Veep was winning for Julie Louis-Dreyfus, it was getting nominated for Tony Hale and Anna Klumsky, every year before it won Best Comedy Series, almost every year. But Silicon Valley has only ever gotten one acting nomination, for Thomas Middleditch, Best Comedy Actor 2 years ago, and he dropped out last year. So the Actors Branch seems very skittish about the show, and that might be one of the reasons it hasn't been able to translate that momentum into a win in the top category. I think if they can break through a little bit more with the acting, then they might be a contender, assuming they maintain everywhere else. And I think one place to look for that is potentially Kumail Nanjiani for supporting actor. He gets an Oscar bump from getting that screenwriting nomination for The Big Sick. So I think it's possible, but I think it does need that acting support, because otherwise it always kind of feels like an also-ran.
The acting branch, we should explain, is the second largest branch in the Academy, which has about 22 or 3,000 members. It's about 10% of that. The biggest branch is actually the branch for executives of media companies. But yet 10% is a big percentage of, if you just want to take statistical sampling, you don't need more than 1%, right, or 1.5%. Here's a case of where you've got 10, so it's always a good bellwether. What about that important casting nomination and that important sound editing nomination? These are little tea leaves we wags look for that show us support across the Academy that you wouldn't think to look for unless you were trained, right?
Yeah, best casting especially is a big one. For the last 2 or 3 years, it had gone to the best program winner, movie, miniseries, drama, and comedy every year. Last year did break that up. I predicted Stranger Things would win best drama series, especially after it won best casting. But that was one year there was a disconnect. Handmaid's Tale won drama series, and Stranger Things won casting, but it still kind of held up everywhere else. Big Little Lies won casting and best miniseries, and Veep won best casting and best comedy series. So look to whatever gets nominated there, and especially what wins there. To at
the creative arts prior to the main. Yeah. All right. So let's switch over to drama series then. And this is where I have to be a bit critical of the race. Last year, I think when Game of Thrones was out of Best Drama Series, Hulu did something very shrewd and smart, and that is they followed the Mad Men formula. They had a hot contender in this drama race, and they got those episodes out early. They got them out in April. They gave a binge experience. I think they only had 3, but they started adding more and more and more. But they gave them multiple episodes, more than 1 or 2, for voters, and I think it made a difference. This year, Hulu was late with their DVDs. They sent them in May with everyone else. It was in this deluge, this mountain of DVDs you get, and I think that hurt them. And maybe not, because at this point, year 2, everybody already knows Handmaid, or even is watching it, or even if they're not watching it, they still are prone to like it or follow the same voting pattern sweep as last year. But I think it was a big mistake to drop its odds a little bit, and then Game of Thrones has a huge disadvantage. They haven't had new episodes in forever, so it's not top of mind. And so all of a sudden you might say, oh, well, Game of Thrones finally, and its 5th nomination broke through, or was it after 5, broke through and won. A cycle we see often at the Emmys, the delayed reaction. Now it should just own it. As you said before, we see repeat winners in these program races. But the behind-the-scenes dynamics are different now in terms of the wild card of the DVD send, and also the new voting system where plurality needs to win. I think that really levels up this playing field. Do you see either Handmaids or Game of Thrones increasing the number of nominations this year, or?
I think Handmaids is in a good position to increase. I can see them getting as many acting nominations, if not more. They've got 3 guest actresses who could get in. They could get in 2 supporting actresses again. Elizabeth Moss is sure to get back in for drama actress. Because last year they only got 13 nominations, which for a drama series winner, when you consider Game of Thrones keeps getting 22, 23, 24 nominations.
Game of Thrones holds the record for the most of all time.
Yeah, and so, it was a little bit light for Handmaid's Tale, for a drama series winner. So I can see it, especially in year 2, carrying that momentum. I can definitely see it improving in the nominations. Game of Thrones, I don't see it improving. And I can see it maybe dropping, but by dropping, I mean maybe from like 24 to like 19 or 20. It'll still be huge. But this year it's going head to head against The Crown and against Westworld, and these are going to be competing in a lot of the same craft categories against each other for fantasy or for period. So and these high production value shows that did really well last year, and Stranger Things, might take a bite out of Game of Thrones' total a little bit. But as long as it doesn't lose too much ground, like if it dips below like 15 or something, I think that'll be like a grave moment. But I think if it's still hovering around 20, I think it'll still be a very strong contender to win.
Out of our 18 experts making predictions at Gold Derby, 12 say Handmaids will win, 5 say Game of Thrones, and 1 holdout says The Americans. Now, that's a fascinating pick there, because we know that could happen. That show has such cachet and so much love over the years, and it has been under-recognized. It's a new voting system, and and we don't know what will happen there. And it begins with the letter A. And one of our favorite things to point out at Gold Derby is how often things at the top of the ballot get preference. However, of course, the Emmys a few years ago changed the order of items on the ballot by doing one half of them alphabetical and one half reverse alphabetical. So one half of these, Westworld is going to be near the top, and the other half, Americans, is going to be near the top. But Americans gets lots of love across the board, doesn't it, Dan?
Yeah, it lost a tiny bit of ground last year by losing the drama series nomination, but it kept everything else. So drama actor, drama actress, writing, guest actress. So it's the sentimental favorite in the sense that it went out on top. It's one of the few shows that end as well liked as it started, and it has this underdog appeal. Like, winning for your last season is difficult, and especially if you haven't won before. The Sopranos did it, but it already won once before. Breaking Bad also won its 2nd award on its last season. So we haven't seen a show win on its last season for the first time. But it could be that kind of Tatiana Maslany of the best drama series, where it has that underdog appeal, it has that passionate support, it has a benefit that Handmaid's Tale doesn't have, in that it aired at the right time and the whole season is eligible. Handmaid's Tale is actually going to have a few hanging episodes that are hanging a little too far, so they won't be eligible for these Emmys. And Game of Thrones aired ages ago, almost a year ago, so The Americans is kind of right in the sweet spot where their entire season is eligible. It's the last season, it was loved. It could be a kind of jaw dropper in this new voting system.
So could This Is Us, of course. It's in 3rd place among our odds issued by the experts. Nobody's picking it to win. Everybody predicts it for a nomination. And last year, quite a few experts predicted it would win, because it's that big, brooding family story that they love. I mean, it's angst-ridden. It's a modern family. The way these stories play out among the members, we know that they love that kind of format. This Us is likely to pick up more nominations this year, is it? It
could. I think it needs writing or directing. I think this year it submitted fewer episodes in each category to, so they don't divide.
Not good.
No, actually, it's good so that they don't divide their support among too many episodes. And they have one of those episodes that they got in there is their Super Bowl episode. So you see that on the ballot, and there are not many other episodes to kind of pull support away. I think it's got a much better shot at writing and or directing. The actors branch, just like most of its nominations last year, were for acting, so I could see it doing very well there again. It could get all 5 of the main family members in. It got most of them in last year, but it didn't get in.
Chrissy Metz didn't get in, yeah.
No, Chrissy Metz got in. Mandy Moore didn't get in, and Justin Hart didn't get in. And this year they could both do that. So, it doesn't have the snob appeal, which has always been it's a network show. It's a family kind of old-fashioned tearjerker. But again, new Emmy system, you only need to be beloved with 7 nominees, about 17, 18% of the voters to potentially win. So, and especially when you have so many other dark shows like Handmaid's Tale, Game of Thrones, The Americans that might appeal to a similar voter, This Is Us might have a certain voter demographic all to itself.
The Crown is in 4th place. 18 experts pick it to be nominated, 0 to win. Last year, quite a few people thought it could win. It's going to do, of course, very well in nominations again, especially those crafts. The recent wedding by Harry and Meghan has made us all royal lovers again recently. That could help. But and by the way, quite a few experts, several, picked Claire Foy to win Best Drama Actress. So they still think the show has appeal and cachet with voters. What do you think about The Crown?
I think it's pretty safe for a nomination. It aired, it aired its 2nd season back in December, so it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind potentially. But Claire Foy, I think is, I thought her 2nd season was even better than her 1st. This is going to be the last chance to reward her. If people love her role and her performance that much this season, that could certainly carry over into drama series like we saw last year with Elizabeth Moss winning with Handmaid's Tale. But I think we'll have to see in the nominations how it does compared to last year. Last year, I think it had 18 nominations, or somewhere around there. I might have the exact number wrong, but it did extremely well in the nomination. So if it can hold on, especially with Game of Thrones back, then I think it's certainly a major contender.
Last year, when we were on the ground here in Hollywood, we Gold Derby editors, and were just looking around town at all the FYC events and screenings and parties and lunches and everything and the campaigns, we were wowed by what we saw at the events for Stranger Things. The crowds went nuts, of course. It was always the contender last year that had the most crowds, the most passionate followers, the most crazed devotees. So there were many of us who thought it could win last year because the buzz was so deafening. It should be nominated at least this year, right? And it stands to win a few, right?
It should be nominated. It's under a lot of circumstances, if there were a lot of other shows that were potentially piling into this category, I could see it being vulnerable. But looking past our top 7, our odds kind of just are completely. These top 7 are so far ahead of everyone else in our predictions. I worry that we're underestimating some shows, but it looks pretty safe for a nomination again.
David Harbour is ahead for supporting actor, so it's at least in one of those marquee categories out front.
Yeah, and it should get at least a couple of acting nominations like it did last year. Millie Bobby Brown and David Harbour got in. I see them both getting in again this year. David Harbour potential win. Noah Schnapp, also another young actor from the show who had a really big breakthrough year, could get a nomination. But it's a sci-fi fantasy show, which sometimes, if you're Game of Thrones, you get in every year. But we've seen it happen where Heroes was nominated one year, dropped the next. Lost won its first year, was notoriously snubbed completely.
Yeah, but that was a situation having to do with the union process that year and their fault.
But there's still a little bit of a fickle nature to the Academy in terms of which of these kind of sci-fi fantasy genre shows they embrace and how long they embrace them. So I don't think it's safe, but I think that's probably getting back in.
Westworld is my indulgence these days. And finally, last night, June 17th, the episode finally kind of made sense. That all this was explained to me in a way that maybe everyone else was following it, but I certainly didn't know what was going on until last night. I love this series. I know that there's a lot of split opinion on there, but it's got a very high Rotten Tomatoes score. It's got devoted fans like me. It's going to do very, very well in the nominations. That show is so stylized, so beautiful and smartly packaged. I think it can win a plurality vote. What do you think?
I think it's likely to be nominated. I think last year it was a huge surprise. Not that it got nominated, but how much it got nominated. It overperformed pretty much everywhere.
A surprise to you, Daniel, but not to those of us who things.
Well, I mean, it looked like it was going to be a big, but it had aired in the previous fall, like its first season. And so how many people still remembered it? It was a sci-fi show. We weren't sure if they were going to embrace another sci-fi show or if it was just a Game of Thrones thing, where that's the only kind of genre show that they like these days. Then it got 22 nominations, overperformed pretty much everywhere. This year, it's actually even in a better position because it just finished airing. It had the time slot that Game of Thrones always used to have in the spring, right, leading into Emmy voting. That helped Game of Thrones rack up all those nominations. I do think the Game of Thrones Westworld, with them happening in the same season, poses the biggest problem for both shows because they're the two shows. First of all, they're both HBO. They're both technically, impressive. And they both have a kind of similar sci-fi fantasy tone where I can see they could siphon votes away from each other potentially, and we might see in the nominations where they might both go down a little bit. But yeah, I still see Westworld getting a lot of nominations, and potentially, I think that makes it relatively safe for a Best Drama Series nomination.
Well, you're not going to that whole question about a win, are you? Because you don't. It can win. And by the way, in those next few slots on our odds, we have Killing Eve. 4 of our 18 experts say it will be nominated for drama series. We have 1 fighting for one of your favorite shows, Mindhunter. And I could see that happening, either one of those actually getting in. And by the way, down at number 11, Billions, which for some reason doesn't get Emmy love. I don't know why. It seems like a perfect made for Emmy show. Its cast members have won Emmys. It's upscale and pretentious as hell. It's really good. People are addicted. So I think those are possibilities. Killing Eve, Mindhunter, Billions of squeaking in there. Now, also down on our list are Altered Carbon. That's not getting in. No. Counterpart, boy, that's got a very devoted fan base. But the one that could really get in is The Good Doctor, the ABC drama with Freddie. People love that show, and we sometimes, as pundits, overlook the bread and butter shows like the primetime dramas or procedurals. They don't often get nominated, but this one is different. It's in a way, The Good Doctor, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think The Good Doctor, it was such a huge ratings hit. It's a medical drama on a network, which, the prestige for those has dropped significantly in terms of perception. But it's a huge hit. 2, it has a central lead performance that's very showy, and he's playing an autistic character. So, and having a character who's autistic as the lead character, it is a groundbreaking thing for TV. So it does have that cachet as well, where it has social importance. So I do think The Good Doctor does have a good combination of factors where it could sneak into Best Drama.
Why, Daniel, why do we always underestimate Homeland? Homeland just had a triumphant season critically. Ratings were strong. It is a show that we keep underestimating over and over and over again. And it's the show that even when it was not nominated one year for drama series, it came back. And that's very rare at the end. So now we say it's not coming back again. Are we fools?
I don't think so. The time it came back was an interesting, unique circumstance. The year it missed out, there were 6 nominees for Best Drama Series. The year it came back was the year they expanded to 7. And that 7th season, like the season it missed 4 was, it was considered a downturn for the show. A lot of people didn't like that season. So it wasn't a surprise that it dropped out. And the season that did get in again was considered kind of a resurgence for the show. And they had that extra 7th slot in that category. So it felt like, it's like, okay, they just kind of brought it back in. This time around, I think it's of the kind of age where, it might be a little bit the ship has sailed on it. Like the Emmy voters might have moved on from it. Like last year it got in for Mandy Patinkin a little surprisingly. It still gets in for directing most years. So it's still definitely on their radar, but Claire Danes didn't get in last year, so I think that was a big deal. So I would say never, but it's not something that I would bet the farm on.
Look, it's got in its title the most powerful word in the American language, the word home. Many studies say that is the word that our eye falls on, and we have the most positive reaction to in terms of linguistic studies. Homeland is, I think, appealing that way. Look, we keep saying, "Oh, the ship has sailed for Modern Family," and then it keeps getting in every year. Let's go back there. Modern Family, is it in this year or not?
It could be. It hasn't missed yet, but it keeps trickling down every year. I think last year it only had 2 other nominations besides Best Comedy Series. And the thing about Emmy voting is that for nominations, I believe for nominations you're not voting for here are the 7 shows I want nominated, or here are the 3, or however many. You can vote for as many shows as you feel like are deserving. In Modern Family, people still watch it. I'm sure a lot of the Emmy voters who loved it before still watch it now. Even if they don't love it as much as they did before, they might be like, "Oh yeah, that's still a good show," and check it off. I don't think I have it in my predictions, but I feel probably I'm going to feel dumb if it gets in again, because it's one of those shows for the last couple of years. I think a lot of people have been like, okay, this is the year it's out. And then it comes back in. And it's got 8 nominations. It's one of the most nominated shows for Best Comedy Series of all time. So I think it's maybe tied for second behind Cheers and MASH. So it could. But the way it's been losing ground in other categories makes me think that maybe this is the year they finally let it go in that race.
Or maybe it's the year that it just keeps going.
Or maybe, yeah.
Last question, Daniel, the biggie. Will secret anarchists within the Academy, like me, give a nomination for Best Comedy Series to Roseanne? Now, we know about a month ago that was a real possibility. Now, all of a sudden, all the problems with Roseanne. This morning, the news broke that ABC is going on with that show. All of a sudden, if voters feel, you know what? All right, we punished her. She's off the team. But the show is such an important part of American culture and TV history that we should finally nominate it. And as you and I know, and many people watching this video do not, it's never been nominated for Comedy Series. In its previous 9 seasons, it won the Golden Globe, it won the Peabody, had all this traction. She won Best Actress. Laurie Metcalf won 3 times. It's got a ton of other Emmys. Is it for Comedy Series?
I think the problem is when you nominate Roseanne for Best Comedy, I don't think she'll get in for Comedy Actress, but not only is her name the title of the show, which doesn't help, I believe she's also Sarah Gilbert produced this version. I think Roseanne is also still a producer, so she'd still get a nomination for it. I don't think it's gonna happen. I really don't think they want it to happen. It's gonna, if the nominations are announced and Roseanne is on that list, they're gonna look a little bit uncomfortable. So I can see Roseanne.
What's new? As you just mentioned, and this is the important part of this voting process, is the voters now, and this is fairly new. They used to, by the way, like 2-3 years ago, you had to rank 10, just pick 10 out of all the comedy contenders. But now, as you say, you just pick everyone that you think is worthy. So you're not compromising another vote to giving Roseanne a vote here. Of course, this was not the system used when Roseanne competed at past Emmys. So never say never, Daniel.
I think
it's a possibility.
I think if they're gonna embrace the show, I feel like they won't embrace the show, but I feel like they could give sympathy hugs to potentially John Goodman or Laurie Metcalf or even Sarah Gilbert for acting, Estelle Parsons for guest, just for because they were caught up in this storm through no fault of their own really, except for making the show with her, and she kind of pulled the rug out from under all of them. So I can see them getting some love, but I really do think that Roseanne for Comedy Series, especially given that it never got in before, even in its heyday, I feel like if they want to go revival, Will and Grace is going to be a safer bet in terms of show that won't launch 1,000 angry think pieces the next morning.
But as we know that when TV shows explode in nuclear suicide, as Charlie Sheen's show had, 2.5 Men, the stars, John Cryer won, and there were other nominations for the cast after that. There is this kind of hug factor to those who survived the disaster. Because remember who's voting here. These are people in the TV industry who have to face these disasters all the time. You think you're working on a hit show and suddenly somebody's caught in a compromising position and boom, the whole thing falls apart. That's showbiz, baby. But I think you're wrong, Daniel. I think there's a chance it could get back in. And I think there's a chance she could get back in. And I think Laurie Metcalf is probably the new front runner after just winning the Tony Award. Anyway, that's it. Thank you, Daniel. We're going to keep chewing down our predictions. Those of you watching, make yours. Prove you know more than me and Daniel and all these other experts and editors at the site, because you know what? You probably do.